My husband claimed he had a fear of flying, but the twist? He was secretly a pilot who had been living a completely separate life as a corporate jet owner. It started, as life's most surreal turns often do, on a completely ordinary Tuesday. I was sprawled out on our old beige sectional, glass of cheap white wine in one hand, flipping mindlessly through some crime thriller on Netflix that I'd already forgotten the name of. The kids were upstairs, immersed in a never-ending battle over the Xbox. Noah was on another one of his business trips, supposedly down in Dallas to help some client. He'd been gone for 3 days, not unusual given his line of work, finance management, or at least that's what I thought he did. Then, my phone buzzed, jolting me out of my daze. Unknown number. Normally, I just ignore it, but something told me to answer. "Hello?" I said, balancing my wine on the armrest and putting the phone to my ear. "Hello, is this Mrs. Sarah Jensen?" A man with a formal tone and a slight British accent spoke on the other end. "Yes, who's this?" My mind started to wonder if it was one of those scam calls. But who asks for someone by name with that kind of courtesy? "My name is Richard. I'm calling from Jensen Private Aviation. I work as Mr. Noah Jensen's personal assistant, and I wanted to confirm his flight for tomorrow morning. The Gulfstream G650 is scheduled to depart at 9:30 a.m. from O'Hare, bound for Boston. Just wanted to make sure he'll be ready." My mind went completely blank. A chartered Gulfstream? I sat there in stunned silence, my grip tightening around my wine glass. "Mrs. Jensen? Are you still there?" Yes. "I'm here," I stammered, trying to get a hold of myself. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My husband has a fear of flying. He doesn't get on planes. Ever." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. "Ma'am, I apologize if I've caused any confusion. Mr. Jensen has been flying with us regularly for several years now. Perhaps he hasn't had the opportunity to mention it?" That last line hit me like a punch to the gut. "No," I said, a chill running down my spine. "He never mentioned anything. But thanks for the heads up. I'll speak with him." I hung up, and for a moment, I sat there, processing. My husband, who'd sworn he wouldn't set foot on a plane, had been flying on a Gulfstream for years. This wasn't some phobia thing he'd gotten over. He had flat out refused to fly with us on countless occasions. Family reunions, weddings, vacations, I had driven or taken trains with the kids across the country because Noah insisted he couldn't handle it. I believed him, defended him, even when my family had raised eyebrows. My hand shook as I dialed his number. He picked up after a few rings, his voice casual, as if he had no idea his life was about to explode. "Hey, babe," he said, sounding slightly distracted. "I was just about to call. You okay?" "Am I okay?" I could barely keep the anger out of my voice. "I don't know, Noah. You tell me. You planning on taking a nice little jet ride to Boston tomorrow morning?" Silence. And then, he cleared his throat. "Sarah. Let's talk about this when I get home." "No, Noah," I said, my voice hard. "We're talking about it now. Richard called me. Your personal assistant, apparently. He wanted to confirm your flight." "Oh," he muttered. "Listen, Sarah, I know this sounds bad, but there's more to it." "More to it?" I hissed, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Noah, you've lied to me for years. You made me believe you had a phobia. Do you realize the things I've done to accommodate that? The vacations I've rearranged, the events I've missed because of you? I get it, okay? I get why you're upset," he said, his voice rising defensively. "But I have my reasons, Sarah. It's complicated." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Complicated? How? Explain to me how lying about a fear of flying for our entire marriage is anything but deceitful. "Sarah, just wait until I get back. I'll explain everything in person. Please. Just hold on." "Noah, are you cheating on me?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, and for a second, the air between us seemed to freeze. "What?" "No," he said, sounding almost offended. "It's not like that. What am I supposed to believe? Because right now, you sound like the world's worst liar. You have until you get home to come up with a good reason, Noah, or so help me." I hung up before he could say anything more. That night, I lay awake, my mind spinning. I replayed every conversation, every excuse he'd ever given, every small, strange detail I'd ignored. How he'd sometimes disappear for work weekends. How he never seemed too keen to talk about his job in detail. How, come to think of it, I didn't really know much about his company, aside from what he'd told me. When he finally walked through the door the next evening, he looked like hell, rumpled, exhausted, and unshaven. He tried to greet me with a forced smile, but I wasn't having it. "Noah," I said, folding my arms. "Let's hear it. All of it." He looked at me, the exhaustion in his eyes melting into something I didn't recognize. Regret? Shame? I wasn't sure. "Sarah, I didn't want you to find out this way," he began, sinking into the armchair across from me. I didn't want you to find out at all, honestly. Well, here we are, I said coldly, watching him squirm. Okay, he said, rubbing his hands together, like he was buying time. I don't just work in finance, Sarah. I own a few companies. Actually, I own more than a few. And part of that involves maintaining a certain image, attending events, traveling frequently. Flying. It's not just work. It's a lifestyle. A lifestyle I knew you'd never want to be part of. Wait, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You're not a finance manager, you own companies? What kind of companies? He shifted uncomfortably. Corporate leasing firms, aviation services, investment portfolios. It's complicated. Don't say that word again, I snapped, my voice rising. You're telling me that while I've been working as a high school teacher, scraping to make ends meet, you've been flying around in private jets, rubbing shoulders with God knows who? It's not like that, Sarah, he said, but he couldn't look me in the eye. I kept it from you because I wanted to protect you. I knew you wouldn't want any part of that world. And I knew you wouldn't understand. Oh, so now I'm some naive fool who can't handle the truth? That's not what I meant, he said, a hint of desperation in his voice. Sarah, I was trying to keep our lives simple. I thought I could keep it separate. Separate? I laughed, a bitter sound that didn't even sound like me. What exactly are you keeping separate, Noah? Because from where I'm standing, our whole life together has been one big lie. He looked down at his hands. There's something else, he said, his voice barely a whisper. What? I spat, crossing my arms. Could it possibly get any worse? Yes. He paused, taking a deep breath. I have another family. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Another family? Was this some kind of sick joke? You have a what? A son, he said quietly, barely able to look at me. His name is Ethan. He's 9 years old. And his mother. Her name is Helena. She lives in Boston. For a moment, I thought I was going to be sick. All the air seemed to drain from the room, and I struggled to find my voice. Are you telling me that for 16 years, you've been living a double life? That you have a son with another woman? And I'm just finding out about it now? He nodded slowly, shame written all over his face. Sarah, I didn't plan for this to happen. Helena and we were together before I met you. Things got complicated, and, well, we had a child. I never wanted to hurt you, or her, or anyone. But you did, I whispered, feeling my heart shatter into a million pieces. You hurt all of us. Sarah, please, he said, his voice breaking. I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But I didn't want you to find out this way. Well, guess what, Noah? You don't get to choose how I find out. You don't get to choose anything anymore. I stood up, unable to look at him. I stared down at Noah, a man I realized I barely knew, despite 16 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a life I thought we'd built together. The hurt in my chest was searing, but behind the pain, something else stirred, a quiet, simmering fury. The kind that makes you see everything with perfect clarity. Noah looked away, his head bowed, a pitiful display that made me angrier. I was done being pitiful. You know what, Noah, I said, my voice cold and controlled, a tone I barely recognized in myself. You're right. You don't get to choose anymore. I'm going to handle this, and I'm going to handle it my way. He lifted his head, confused and wary, like he knew something dark was brewing but couldn't yet see it. And that's how I liked it. I didn't wait for a response, I grabbed my purse and car keys and left the house. I didn't even know where I was going, but I needed space to think, to breathe, and to figure out my next move. In the days that followed, I was a woman possessed. I went through everything. Bank accounts. Tax returns. Property records. In a bizarre twist of fate, I had more access to his files than I'd ever thought because I'd been the one managing our finances for years, thinking Noah was a simple finance manager who needed a break from the paperwork at home. Turns out, I was sitting on a gold mine of secrets. Offshore accounts, business dealings under different names, even whole properties he'd never told me about. I also dug into Helena, the other woman, with some online sleuthing and found more than I'd bargained for. She was Noah's college sweetheart, a woman he'd been involved with before and apparently throughout our marriage. They had photos on social media, though he was never in them, Helena's privacy settings, no doubt. But more than that, she and her son, Ethan, were living a far more luxurious life than I'd realized. She was the family who got the private jets, the luxurious vacations, the sprawling estate in Boston. All while my kids and I were told to keep things modest, to save for the future. Mom? My daughter, Lily, knocked on the door as I was reviewing bank statements one afternoon. I quickly closed the laptop. I hadn't told them anything yet. They were teenagers, smart, and they'd sensed the storm, but I needed to handle this carefully. Yes, sweetie? I replied, hoping my voice sounded normal. Is everything okay? You've been, different. Don't worry, honey, I said, forcing a smile. Mom's just been busy with some family things. But it'll all make sense soon. I promise. Noah came by the house a few days later to talk things over. He must have sensed I wasn't taking things lying down. Sarah, please, he started, sitting across from me in the kitchen. I know I've hurt you. I know it's a lot. But we have kids. We've built a life together. A life? I scoffed, arms crossed. You built a life with another family, Noah. I was just a convenient lie to keep your affairs tidy. No, that's not true, he said, looking desperate. I love you. I never wanted to lose you. Oh, spare me the theatrics. I'm past the lies, I snapped. What I want now is justice. For myself, and for our kids. Because while you were living it up with Helena, I was here, sacrificing everything for our so-called future. Sarah, please don't do anything drastic. I'll give you whatever you want, he pleaded. Oh, I plan to take everything I deserve, Noah. And not because you're letting me. I filed for divorce the very next morning, but that was only the start. While Noah might have assumed I'd go the traditional route and quietly split our assets, I had a more comprehensive plan in mind. Step 1 was calling my lawyer, Ellen, who happened to be a bulldog in court and a close friend from college. Ellen knew my history with Noah, had seen our kids grow up, and when I told her the full story, she was outraged. Oh, honey, she said, her voice dripping with determination. We're going to leave that man with nothing but his lies. Think we can get the other family's assets on the table? I asked, a slight tremble in my voice despite myself. She grinned wickedly. Watch me. Over the next few weeks, we gathered everything we could, financial records, evidence of hidden bank accounts, property deeds, and even copies of Noah's communications with Helena. Turns out, Noah was incredibly careless with his private files. He thought he was safe with everything hidden behind a password, but one night, when he'd left his laptop unlocked in his rush to the bathroom, I found more than I ever thought possible. Notes to Helena about merging our lives soon and promises to find a way to break it to Sarah gently. The man had plans to walk out on us anyway, he just didn't expect me to be one step ahead. When the day came for mediation, Noah looked smug, as though he'd convinced himself he'd charmed me back into submission. He even tried to reach for my hand, whispering, "Let's keep things peaceful for the kids, okay?" I smiled sweetly. "I'm doing this for the kids, Noah." Once the mediators and lawyers sat down, I let Ellen do the talking. She outlined everything in exquisite detail, Noah's double life, his offshore accounts, his hidden properties, and even the extravagant gifts he'd been giving Helena and her son. Noah went pale as a ghost, and his attorney looked as if he'd been hit by a truck. Noah Jensen has not only betrayed my client emotionally, but he's financially compromised their entire family, Ellen concluded, her voice steely. We'll be pursuing full custody of the children, as well as compensation for emotional damages, with a claim on all of his assets, including those currently held under his second family. Noah tried to stammer some defense, but I cut him off. "How's that fear of flying working out for you now, Noah?" I said, just loud enough for him to hear. His face went scarlet. The mediation ended with a one-sided agreement. Noah's lawyer saw the writing on the wall and knew he'd lose if it went to court. Noah would keep a fraction of his assets, but I would get the lion's share. Not only that, but Ellen had found a way to legally expose his hidden business dealings, costing him lucrative corporate contracts and effectively dismantling the empire he'd built. But the final stroke came a week later. I sent Helena a neatly packaged folder, full of documents that showed Noah's betrayal wasn't just with me. He'd had other women on the side, as evidenced by emails I'd discovered. Helena called me in a fury, cursing him in a mix of English and furious Italian. I let her rant, knowing I'd just dismantled his entire life. She swore she was going to leave him and take everything she could, and I believed her. The divorce finalized 3 months later. Noah, stripped of his businesses and reputation, moved into a cramped apartment in a suburb an hour away. He's been trying to reconnect with the kids, but they want nothing to do with him. As for me? I took the money, sold our home, and bought a new place, a beautiful, airy house where the kids and I could make new memories. I built a comfortable life on the ruins of his lies. And I even started taking flying lessons, something I'd always wanted to do but never pursued, thanks to Noah's supposed fear. Turns out, I love it, the freedom, the control, the exhilaration. One day, after I got my pilot's license, I took a solo flight, soaring high above the clouds, looking down at the sprawling city below. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was the one with wings. Noah will never know what he lost. He'll spend the rest of his life grappling with the ashes of what he destroyed. But I'm soaring above it all.